The EL Gazette was actually referring to an article that's slightly more complimentary. It's on the back page where the English Language Gazette has given me my new title of Teacher Training Troubadour. Which over all the many years of teaching, I've thought of different words for it: lecturer, facilitator, monster, all the things that students think of us as. But I think the word troubadour is rather a nice one. So my job, today and from now on, is to be your troubadour. How many parts are there to the listening? I can never remember, but you can probably help me. Thank you. There are 4 parts to the listening. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, there's not much point having 4 parts to the listening if they test the same thing 4 times. Do they appear to test different skills? They should do. In a nutshell, what different skills do they test? Part 1 tests
reaction.
It's not just the words, it's the meaning behind them, isn't it? We used to have a single prompt and response. This has changed. It is now part of a conversation. Candidates now hear a context. They hear 4 exchanges. It's a little bit like when I had my telephone conversation and my friend said, "You're on the front page." And I said, "Will I be pleased?" And she said, "Yes." It's not just the words that we listen for. A tape script would not give us the answer. You're listening for the functional meaning. One thing that hasn't changed, and I'm very pleased about, is that each of the items is separate. In other words, the candidate does not get one wrong and the whole dominoes collapse. Please tell your students, don't panic if you get one answer wrong. You've got all the others. Part 2 is probably unfamiliar to you if you've not seen the test for a while. It's listening to locate not specific information, it's listening for gist, it's extensive listening. Who are the speakers? Are they arguing? Are they agreeing? When this first came in, people said, what on earth is the point? Well, actually, if you're listening to a conversation, you do want to know what's happening. Should I join in? Should I not? Who are the speakers? What's the likely outcome? And again, it is listening. You wouldn't always know the answer from just seeing a tape script. Try this one with your students because they will like it. You can click on to the website these days and you can download all the listenings. What my students find is this is not a trick. There's lots and lots of clues. So the examiner for the first time is not trying to get you to get it wrong, but to give you every chance to get it right. Listening part 3 is the note-taking. It's not a dictation. They do not write down everything they hear. Some of my students panic because they can't spell. Well, they should take lessons from native speakers if they think that spelling is a problem. If the examiner can read what is there and understand it, we don't care about the spelling. It's a test of listening. What I'd like you to do is to have a quick look at the 4 parts of the reading and to see what reading skills you think they are assessing. Do you know, you're doing exactly what my students do. You're trying to read every word of these texts. Don't you find that students do that? They see a reading text and they want to understand every word. The first thing that I noticed when I saw these papers was that you can't possibly understand everything, nor do you need to. What is going on in part 2? It is really testing reading not just as line by line, word by word, but seeing the text as a whole. seeing the text as a coherent whole, and you do have to know what's coming next and what's gone before, and you have clues in the sentences like after that or on the other hand. You may remember that in the past you had a gap fill type exercise called English usage, and that was done at word level. Word level is not a bad way of progressing towards it, but I think sentence level, paragraph level, is far more of a reliable reading skill. This is the part that I as a teacher find most difficult. I find that I've got more time preparing this. I can't go in and just get the right answer by glancing at it. It's quite tightly constructed. Some people say, well, this is a little bit academic. Well, it is. I mean, I think reading at Communicator B2 level on the Common European Framework is not merely academic, but it is also academic. I think many B2 candidates will be going on to read at university, or read in the office, or read in whatever line of work they're involved in. And they will need to be able to see a text as a whole. I think your learners need practice and preparation. I think they need you, not necessarily to tell them words like anaphoric and cataphoric referencing. I never know the difference. I know one goes forward and one goes back, but which is which I can never remember. But I do know it's important that a word like however tells me that I should have read something before it. Try this with your students. I think they will find it actually quite challenging, quite interesting, and I think that they will find that it makes them also better writers. If you can see how a text is constructed from a reading point of view, I think you can transfer that to the writing skills. This is a classic of skim reading. A few years ago we didn't know the difference, but skim reading, as I understand it, is just get the general idea. And half of these questions you can get the answer without understanding all the words in the text. And even the second half, it's not saying what's the answer, it's saying where's the answer. Which text gives you that information? So it's actually writing in order to get something done. And there is still a space, I think, for more creative writing. Write a letter to a friend, telling him or her what your future career plans are, etc., etc. Many people do still write these interactional letters. The word limit, well, it's there, it's explicit, and if a student says, I don't know how much to write, you know, it's very explicit, between 150, 200 words. That shouldn't be too much of a problem to hit the mark. Of the 3 skills tested in International ESOL, which do your learners find least attractive, by and large? Which do they least like doing? I'm glad you said that, because that has been my experience. I think it's partly the fault of the education system. Writing has always been what you get wrong rather than what you get right. And even if you have a correction code, you know, you see good correction codes in different books. I see them on classroom walls. Correction code, symbols showing missing word or spelling mistake. Even the correction code can have this kind of negative feel. A couple of years ago at Sidmouth International School, and I've taken this forward with Academic Summer, I banished the correction code. I took it off the wall and said to teachers, sorry, you can't use that anymore. I'm going to confiscate your red pen. And after the rebellion had died down, I said, but we will have an improvement code. It's not just mistakes. It can be showing learners how they can take things a little bit further forward. One of the problems with a correction code was that if you missed a mistake, the students complained. They wanted you to correct every mistake. And sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. I think it's still good practice to get the students to write something in the middle, and then down the sides you can show them where they could improve. not just correcting a mistake, but where a wider range of language might be appropriate. I say that because as an examiner, I no longer do what I did in the past. Do you remember when you started with 20 points and then knocked a point off for every mistake? Do you remember those days? I remember once I got a piece of writing that I took to an examiner's meeting and I read it out. I said, was that bad, good, pretty good? And the general consensus was pretty good. It got -4. And that's no longer what we need in the real world. Accuracy is important, but it's not all important. Again, students have got the dictionary, so they should be able to check their spelling and the meanings of words that they know. Organisation is important, isn't it? How things are laid out. As a target reader, even if something is quite accurate or has a range of language, unless the layout is nice and logical and coherent, I'm not going to bother with it. And I think range of language is also important. So it's not just accuracy, it's range and it's organisation. Over the years, the speaking test has evolved, and those of you who've met me before will know that speaking is my passion in language teaching. You may remember when I first came out, I was talking about this new speaking test. And you were saying, what's new about it? And I was saying, well, for one thing, it doesn't have an examiner. It still doesn't have an examiner. It has an interlocutor. In other words, one of us, if we are trained and if we follow the procedures, may be an interlocutor. But we do not give any marks in the exam. The test is still in 4 parts. These days, the interlocutor has a framework, not a script as such, but the interlocutor is much more controlled in what he or she should ask and how he or she should ask it. The candidate has no preparation time before the test. The candidate goes into the room solo. It's not paired candidates, it's still a one-to-one. In part 1, the interlocutor still asks the candidate to spell his or her family name, but doesn't ask where it comes from or anything else that the candidate may genuinely not know. It's just, what's your family name, how do you spell it? The interlocutor in part 1 has a list of topics, and you can find them in the syllabus if you download the handbook. Familiar topics, family, friends, likes and dislikes. The candidate does not see the questions. The candidate hears the questions from the interlocutor. There'll probably be 4, 5 prompts on a different topic to try and extend the range of language. They will all be familiar topics. In part 2, the interlocutor gives the candidate 2 or 3 social situations. I'm a stranger in your town. I want information. I start. Excuse me, can you tell me the nearest railway station, please? And the candidate has to respond. There's another set of questions, prompts, which mean the candidate has to start. You are at a cinema. Ask about times and costs of films. So the candidate has to act out that part. Still, the candidate does not take a persona in a role play. The candidate is herself or himself. In part 3, the interlocutor and the candidate have 2 sets of information that the candidate does see. So the candidate has pictorial or single word representation, and the task is to exchange information and opinions and to try and agree. Were we going on holiday? The assessment does not hinge on success of deciding together, it's using the language. Maybe they can't agree, doesn't matter, they've used the language to discuss it. The candidate has about 20 seconds, I think it is, to think about what they want to say before it begins. In part 4, the candidate is given a topic to talk about. He or she does not choose the topic, the interlocutor does. The interlocutor says, Now I'd like you to talk on your own for about 2 or 3 minutes, and I'm going to listen. Your topic is the time of year that I like best. Take 30 seconds to think about it, make any notes if you want to. So your topic is the time of year I like best. And the candidate still produces language and then responds to any prompts. And that's it. That's how the test works. Communication gets a global award. Does the candidate communicate overall throughout the test? We listen to the whole thing and we say, yes, she does. Does she meet B2 criteria? Well, more than that. She meets them consistently, and there's even little bits of a level above, in which case it's a first-class pass. I think that this is a communicative rather than a grammar-based test. I think it gives people real-life tasks, and it seems to me that the only way I can help them is by communicative language teaching, which means setting lots and lots of different skills tasks, not just doing listening for an hour at a time, integrating it, lots of interaction, lots of communication, less of a focus on grammatical accuracy or absolutely precise meaning, a lot more on producing what you've got. I'm not saying it's the only method, it's the one that I use, and it's the one that works for this. And I think it remains for me to say, oh, it says it for me. Thank you once again. As always, I love my welcomes in Budapest. And do we have any questions? Somebody has. Any questions I can help you with?